It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large, 60 minutes of smart talk radio featuring guests from all walks of life in conversation with your host, Warner Lewis. So sit back and lend us your ears for the next hour. Now here with today's first guest is the host of Lewis at Large, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another segment of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck, and as always, that means some smart talk radio is in your future. In this segment, very pleased to have Sherry Amatenstein. She is a New York-based therapist and author of the Q&A dating book, Love Lessons from Bad Breakups, and The Complete Marriage Counselor, and contributed to Seal's anthology, Shades of Blue, Writers on Depression, Suicide, and Feeling Blue. She is currently an adjunct professor at NYU. She regularly freelances for publications including Redbook, Brides, Vox.com, and Quartz.com. She also runs seminars nationwide and has offered relationship advice on The Today Show, Early Show, HuffPost Live, Inside Edition, and NPR. Brand new work called How Does That Make You Feel? True Confessions from Both Sides of the Therapy Couch. Sherry, how are you, my friend?
Good. Happy to be here with you today.
Now, should I call you Dr. Amatenstein?
Well, actually, I'm an LCSW, not a doctor,
right.
Licensed clinical social worker.
All right. You know what?
That's happened before. I was actually on television. You know, the TV host said, and let the doctor speak. And I thought, well, my mom will be happy. She wanted me to marry a doctor, but, you know, it's not technically true. But Sherry's fine.
Well, you, in addition to the private practice work that you do, obviously you do a fair amount of public speaking, and you certainly like to share some of your observations. This is probably a book, when you talk about true confessions from both sides of the therapy couch, probably something that people have thought, wow, it's about time somebody did it.
Well, I hope so. I became a therapist midlife. My first career was in publishing. I worked at women's magazines and websites and wrote articles about lots of different things. And it was always an ambition of mine to be a therapist. And when I finally made the leap and went to social work school and became a therapist, I already had like a host of experience behind me in life, I guess, and I loved being a therapist from the beginning. It did and still does feel like such an honor to be in that room, having people trust me with their lives and hearts. But I just felt that the whole notion of that blank slate, of the therapist not being able to reveal anything of themselves for fear that it would impact the treatment, it's very hard to maintain in this day and age. A person can just Google your therapist and find out tons about them. Like, I'm a writer. I wrote a lot before I became a therapist, and you'll definitely find some stuff out about me online. And I started sharing some pieces of myself in my sessions with people when I thought it would help them, not just random sharings, but the whole idea of how can I not be real at all to my patients, is that the only way to really be helpful, and starting to really know other therapists as well, and realize, frankly, that we're in a lot of ways as crazy as our patients, you know. And so the whole idea of this book is that I didn't want people to feel like a therapist needs to be on a pedestal. We're all people. We're all flawed. We all do the best we can, or are trying to learn how to do the best we can. So I'd seen anthologies where it was a lot of patients writing about their experiences, but I hadn't seen any where it was both. So my idea was to have all professional great writers, like Patty Davis is in the book, for instance, and she wrote like a really fabulous piece. But there was no book where it was therapists and patients, each really coming from the heart, writing these raw and real essays about some slice of their experience on the couch.
Sherry, have you found over the years, has the nature of therapy changed? And I guess by that I mean the expectations from patients, and maybe even the expectations, therefore, of therapists.
I think it depends on certainly the insurance industry has changed everything. A lot of people don't have insurance that covers therapy. And so the days of the Freudian, the Woody Allen, be on the couch for 4 days a week, it's not that it doesn't still exist, but it's not as common anymore. There's lots of different types of therapy, like Janine Holmes, who wrote a wonderful piece in my book called It's Just for White People. And she wound up going into analysis, and, she didn't know anything about therapy. She's African American, and in her culture, it's just not a thing that you go into, but she was living in New York, and her fiancé died, and she was a mess, and she was finally coaxed into going to therapy, and she wrote in there, I didn't know that therapy was like dim sum. There's so many different types, and it is. There's cognitive, there's EMDR, there's the traditional, Freudian analysis, like I guess I call myself psychodynamic, where I do what I feel will help the patient. I mean, you go back in order to learn who you are and how you got that way, but I also do a lot of, cognitive work and giving people exercises and helping them figure out who they are now and how not to let all the past dysfunctions keep them from moving forward in their lives. So people stay as long as they need to and often come back, but it's for brush-ups or checkups or here and there, but there are lots of different ways to do therapy, and I think it's helpful to educate yourself about that, which was another reason why I wanted to write the anthology, the How Does That Make You Feel anthology, because I wanted people to see therapist comes in, multicolors, let's say.
What about, I'm curious as to the reaction, those in your profession and fellow therapists. What are you hearing from them about the work that you've done?
Well, everybody has been, I frankly was nervous when my book was about to come out because I realized I'm going to have to let my patients know. That was the first thing, because I work with a lot of writers who are trying to break through and get published, and they're dealing with all their emotional blocks. And not only was I publishing a book, but I was publishing a book that was revealing, for myself and lots of other people and lots of other therapists. But as I wound up telling them, they were interested, but most just went right back to their own lives and their own stuff, which is how it should be. And there was a couple people in the book who I initially approached, two therapists who started writing essays and then just found it too difficult and too raw, and it was too uncomfortable for them to do it. But most of the therapists who are in the book, and most of the therapists who aren't in the book but have read it, are kind of happy it's out there, because they're seeing this is just reality, and people kind of need to see reality.
What about we'll be very careful here to not pass out sort of therapeutic advice, so to speak, just over the radio. But I'm curious as to if therapists as a group could tell their patients one thing, and maybe that one thing is how to view the process of therapy, what would that be? What would be some things that maybe that patients, if they understood certain things, it might be even more effective for them?
I think it's helpful to realize that therapy is about analyzing the resistance. Meaning, a lot of people come in and they're hesitant about it and nervous, and they're afraid that I'm going to want to keep them forever, or they're afraid to really look at themselves because it's going to be so uncomfortable. And so they stop coming because it feels uncomfortable. And the process of therapy is about being able to sit in the room in a safe place and with somebody who's not judging you, allow yourself to feel the feelings. Because when you keep holding on to those feelings, when you keep pushing them away, it's not like they're going anywhere. It's like if you're not willing to look at your stuff, if you're afraid to, it's like you keep throwing junk into a closet. Eventually it's going to spring open and everything's going to just crash down on your head. So this gives you that safe place to be there with this stuff and then leave, and you'll have gotten a lot of stuff out in a safe way and learn from it and be able to go on with the rest of your day.
We're talking with Sherry Amatenstein, and brand new work by her. She is a licensed therapist back east in New York City, and brand new work called How Does That Make You Feel? True Confessions from Both Sides of the Therapy Couch. Here's truly Warner Lewis from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. Sherry, I'm curious, has your philosophy towards the therapy that you provide, has it changed over the years, or are people the same in 2016 as they were, let's say, a decade ago?
I think people are people, and I think it's one of the things that has helped change me, I'd say, since I became a therapist, and it's been 9 years now, is I think as I see how people struggle with all the self-hatred and the beating themselves up and the blaming themselves and the anxiety and the this and the that and all of that, I just keep seeing, oh my God, we're all so hard on ourselves. And it's helped me actually be less hard on myself, and I try to help my patients with that too. Like, we're all people. Be kind to yourself. So, I mean, my thing is to help people learn how to be kinder and more forgiving of themselves. But it's a very difficult world, and especially we know this election cycle is so hard and anxiety-provoking for lots and lots of people. And I'd say the whole 24/7 news cycle, where all they're doing is just pushing all this craziness and fear-mongering on you, it's definitely had an effect on people, I would say.
Well, that's kind of what I was wondering, is that baby boomers maybe approach therapy or the therapeutic process with some different thoughts versus maybe millennials who have grown up with, as you said, a 24-hour news cycle, and everything is constantly overexposed in this desperate need for content that we have all the time. I was just curious, you touched on it briefly, this election, which regardless of which side of the aisle you sit on, it has been a very, very difficult and draining process for everyone.
Absolutely. And I certainly hear it a lot in my office, and I mean, there are a lot of therapists are out there writing about it and talking about it. There's a Facebook group about therapists who are like trying to help people cope with all of this. It's, and the election will be over. We have like a week to go, but it's really brought up so much stuff for so many people. And what I try to do is, again, just kind of help people realize, the only thing that we can control are our actions and our reactions, and take care of ourselves and do what helps us and be proactive in the election if where and when you can. But, ultimately, you're still you, and you just have to focus on that. And I tell a lot of people, stop watching. Don't go to Facebook. I mean, you need to take breaks from it and nurture yourself, and remember that there's the rest of the world out there, too.
Yeah, it does seem a lot of times that the learning process really is just more exposure to just more junk. A lot of times, I don't know that we get much smarter. But also, I wanted to talk to you about, and again, you touch on this a little bit in some of your notes, and that is the idea that we are still not looking at, whether it's the insurance companies or society in general, that mental health care is as important, if not more, than physical health care.
There's such a stigma to it still, which is very, very sad. I mean, so many people are still ashamed to come out that they're depressed, or, come out that they're on psych drugs, or come out with these traumas. And that still exists to this day, and it's very sad and very unfortunate, and I think it's increasingly important to bring that awareness that that mental health mental health issues, they're real. And most of us have something going on, and that's okay. When you have cancer or, you break a leg or something like that, people are, then you're okay. You talk about it because people see there's a cast, there's this, you get sympathy, you're not quote-unquote blamed. But with mental health, people are afraid that they're going to be, and going to therapy for sure, people are afraid that they're going to be looked at differently. So they're not as open about it, and it's almost like they'll sneak into you, almost like they don't even want to realize that they're doing it. But so the more open we can be about sharing that, we're not perfect, we need help, and part of being strong is allowing yourself to be vulnerable. I think that's a very important message. And in my anthology, How Does That Make You Feel?, you really see a lot of therapists being really open about their own stuff. And it's kind of revelatory to people. It's like, oh, wow, yeah. Because, being a therapist doesn't mean that in your own life you don't have your own issues and your own problems that you have to deal with. And to become a therapist, you have to go through your own therapy. I don't see how anybody can be a therapist unless they have gone through therapy, and it's part of most training programs.
What about, particularly in this day and age, issues, and you can share your own patient stories at the level in which you feel comfortable, but all these issues of sexual identity, bisexual, transgender, et cetera, that has to be a subject I would think more and more you're dealing with.
Absolutely. And I live in New York, as we said earlier. So in New York, things are more accepted than they are in other parts of the country. But even here, I definitely still see shame around admitting to certain things. And therapy is a helpful process in order to help you embrace who you are, all the parts of you. Because you're just you, and you don't have a choice about certain aspects, and that's okay. So a lot of it is therapy is helpful in helping them come to terms with that, and a lot of it is shame, fear of other people's reactions. And a big thing I always see in the room is fear of other people's reactions and the fear of being judged. That is such a huge thing for so many people. One of the lines that I always say to people is, really, everybody else is walking around being worried about what you're thinking of them. Self-esteem, it comes from within. If you keep being dependent on external validation to fill those voids in you, it's not going to last. You're just going to need a bigger fix.
What about, again, as you were putting this book together, you could draw on so many thousands and thousands of therapy sessions that you've engaged in. Was it tough for you to limit this thing?
Well, I have 34 essays in the book, including mine. So it did seem to grow and grow, and I wrote one essay, and then, I had all these other contributors, and what I really felt was important for the book was to have many, many, many different types of stories. Some are very funny, like Linda Yellen, who's a humorist and a novelist, wrote, like in play form, a fun little piece about begging her therapist to, let her keep staying in therapy forever, and then there are pieces like Megan Devine, who's a therapist, and then her husband died tragically, and then she felt, I just can't do therapy, I'm an imposter, and she stopped doing therapy for a long time and did other things, and then in the end she decided that she could do it again, and even though she doesn't feel perfect at it, and her piece is called I'm Not the Right One for This Job. So there's, then I have there's a gorgeous piece that Molly Peacock, who's a wonderful, wonderful poet, wrote called Not Even a Smidgen, and she wrote about the morphing of her relationship with her therapist of 38 years. 38 years after the therapist had a stroke. And now they've become friends. And it's a whole different relationship because her therapist can't practice therapy anymore. So, and I have a lot of pieces, like Laura Bogart wrote My Shrink's Ultimatum, because her therapist, who had been so helpful to her to help her deal with sexual abuse issues and things like that, tried to make her lose weight. Like, she kept telling her that she wasn't okay the way she was at the weight that she was. So Laura finally had to stop seeing that therapist and see somebody else. So it's really a whole range of pieces, and I wanted that to be reflected in the book.
Sherry, as we kind of start to wind down here a little bit, a lot of people out there possibly considering therapy for themselves or someone that they know, a family member. What kind of things should people consider when making a decision to contact a therapist?
Well, I think they should do some research, and as we were saying earlier, there are lots of different types of therapists out there. Who who have different kinds of specialties. So I think you should not, sometimes you go to a doctor, an initial visit, and you just don't feel comfortable, so then you go for a second opinion. And like Psychology Today website, for instance, has a lot of therapists on there, including myself, for who you can go see, who's in your neighborhood or this or whatever, though I actually do Skype and phone sessions with people, but I think it's your choice. So I think you need to, at the initial consultation, see how it feels for you. Ultimately you want somebody who there's a really good therapeutic bond with, and you want to set goals for what the therapy is going to be about, though it often morphs into something very different. But like, somebody came up to me at a book signing, and she told me, my therapist always has me pick up stuff for her on the way to a session. And I was like appalled. Like, she thought that must be okay. It is not okay. There are ethics here too, and the therapy is about you. So, and there are lots of things that you need to be careful and look out for as well. The therapy is for you and about you, and there's a lot of fabulous therapists out there, but if you find somebody who is not treating you well, do not stay with that person.
Well, the work is called How Does That Make You Feel? True Confessions from Both Sides of the Therapy Couch. It has been edited lovingly by Sherry Amatenstein. And Sherry, how can people not only find out more about some of the writings and the work that you do, but also, of course, pick up a copy of the book?
Well, thank you for asking. My website is howdoesthatmakeyoufeelbook.com. And they can check me out there. I'm on Twitter at Sherapy NYC, SHERAPY NYC, and there's links to buy the book on the website, and it's also, on Amazon and bookstores and all of that stuff.
Well, we appreciate your insights. And what's next for you? What's your next project?
Right now, I've been on the road doing a lot of book events and just sort of focusing on my practice and this book, because the response has just been overwhelming. It seems to have really touched a nerve for a lot of people. So I'm hoping to have that message out there in a way that it might sound a little weird, but, we're all crazy, we're all human, we're all flawed, and that's okay.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'd love to have you back on again.
Thanks. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large. You love your dog and you love your yard, but sometimes what your dog leaves behind can make you not love your yard so much. Well, when that happens, it's Call of Duty Pet Waste Removal Service to the rescue. Large or small dogs, big yard or small, call Call of Duty. They clean up the mess your dog leaves behind. So if you're tired of cleaning pet waste from your yard, call Call of Duty, 764-7224. That's 764-7224. Prompt, effective, courteous services on the way. Your yard is left clean and waste-free. So don't waste any more time on waste. Call Call of Duty in Lawrence, 764-7224. That's 764-7224. Or visit their website, Call of Duty 2000.